Welcome to 4E TV. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Dr. Mark, and this is my wonderful, awesome, more beautiful, half intelligent wife, Dr. Michele. As we like to say, we are M&M without the sugar. I kind of like that. It's kind of fun. You know, we have a good time with that. And we want you to have a good time, too. So just kind of sit back and relax, and we're going to talk about some really interesting things today, and specifically a topic that many of you are going to find very normal for you, but you may not understand it very well. So we're going to bring some understanding and kind of clarify some matters today. So I want you to sit back and relax and just kind of prepare to have a good time and be blessed. And as you know, just as a reminder, you know, we want you to really get the concept about what we're standing here at 4E. You know, we want you to get the totality of everything and understand that we are about the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Those are the four elements with which we stand. And without putting daily attention on each of these areas, it's like a four-legged chair pulling out a leg. It's not going to hold up with what we put on it. So we want your life to be solid and stable and firm. And like we say, we want you to experience peace. If you don't have peace, perhaps it's because we haven't been spending time daily in all those four areas. That's what brings peace, when we have balance in all those areas. So we here at 4E want to encourage you to do that. That's what we're about. We give you the tools. We want to inspire you, educate you, and motivate you to be the best you can be. You know, today we're going to talk about vitamin D. Now, vitamin D, when you go in to get your blood test from your practitioners, you know, you're going to see a lot of different levels. You might see levels of your hemoglobin A1C. You go in, of course, to get your blood pressure. You might see the C-reactive proteins. You might see your cholesterol, triglycerides, and other things. And at the bottom, there's going to be a vitamin D level. But what does that actually mean to us? What does it mean? When I think of D, I immediately think of the sunshine. Now, I like the sun. I enjoy being outside. The sunshine does something to you, not just with your D, but it does something to you mentally and emotionally. It kind of brings peace. You know, it's kind of what we talk about here from a spiritual level. When you put yourself in the presence of the sun, that would be S-O-N, you do experience peace. And also, when you put yourself in the presence of the sun, S-U-N, you also will experience a sense of peace as well. So vitamin D, when I think of that, I immediately think of the sun, but I never really drew the correlation with its assistance and even necessity regarding bone health. So speaking of bone health, I have a scripture that I really want you to pay close attention to today. It's in Proverbs chapter 3. We'll be looking at verse 7 and 8. Now, I brought my Bible with me. I want you, wherever you are right now, to understand that what we do here at 4E TV, when we open the Word of God, we want you to know what we stand upon, and I'm not just making stuff up. I don't want you to think that what I'm saying cannot be backed up with the Scripture. Too many people say stuff, and there's no validity to it or no way to back it up. So don't believe a preacher just because he says something. Know where to find it. Know where to find it. So I have my Bible. I'm going to turn it right here in the book of Proverbs, and I'm going to read just a couple verses to you, but it's going to be talking about something that as a segue into how we're going to discuss vitamin D today. With that said, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 7 and 8. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. You know, when I hear about the bones, I think, what is it that's going to bring nourishment to the bones? Well, you've got to back up to verse 7. It says, first of all, not being wise in your own eyes. So don't think you're too smart. Don't think you've arrived, because truly we haven't arrived as long as we're on this earth. Truly, if we begin to think we're wise and think we've got it all figured out, that is a great definition of what's called pride. And we know when pride comes, what comes next? That is a fall. So we see we're not supposed to be wise, and this idea of fearing the Lord is very, very important. And it's not like a frightful or a scared fear. It's a holy fear of being in awe of a God that created us and made us, that is so amazing and awesome that we can't fathom his ways or thoughts or deeds. So with that said, we must be in awe of a holy God, not because we're scared of him. He's not some God that sits up on a throne waiting to throw a lightning bolt at us. You know, a lot of people think that. They're thinking that when we do something wrong, we're going to hear this big clasp of thunder that goes off and it makes us duck and makes us scared. That's not the God that is the author of this book. The God that is the author of this book, the God that I know, is a God of love, of mercy. He is a God of justice and discipline, but he does that because he wants us to be better. So this fear is based out of a respect and an awe, not based out of a fear. He's not a tyrant. He is an exemplary leader in our lives who is all-powerful. So when we talk about this whole concept of health to our body and nourishment to our bones, we're talking about that coming from the fear of the Lord and not being wise in our own eyes. When we talk about the bones, if bones from a physical sense are strong and they're not weak, they will stand up under pressure. As I was speaking of regarding the chair, the four legs, physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, if you put weight on those four legs distributed evenly, it's going to hold them. But if you pull one out, it's not going to hold. By the same token, if one of those legs is weak and you put weight on it, is it going to stand? Probably not, especially as the weight of the world comes down upon us. Temptation is everywhere. It's everywhere in the world today, and it's not going to get any less. The world today is a treacherous, dangerous place, and it's getting more so by the day. So as that temptation, that weight of the world comes, if we are not solid in our spiritual bones, we will crumble. Those bones will break, and we will take a fall. Now, I don't want that to happen to myself, my wife, or any of my friends, or you. I want us all to be solid and firm. It's important for us to have spiritual nourishment for our bones, but also physical nourishment for our bones. Now, with that said, speaking of physical nourishment, we're going to return to the discussion of vitamin D because it does relate very well to the health of our bones. All right, so Dr. Michele, my wonderful wife, when we talk about vitamin D, it's good to get a clear understanding of what D actually does. It's not just a number on a test that we're looking at and we throw a capsule at it to replete that. It's much more than that. So can you kind of give us an overview of the purpose or the purposes of vitamin D?
Vitamin D is very, very essential for the absorption of calcium for bone health. We get a little bit caught up on calcium, taking too much calcium supplementation, and we forget to think of the other things that aid the absorption of calcium, like vitamin D, vitamins K1, K2, and the other minerals that are necessary for good bone health. Not only is vitamin D essential for bone health, it is also very important in immune health. It's important in the health of the arterial lining, which is the lining of your blood vessels. It is important even in joint health and in some cases the modulation of pain.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple things there that some people may not be familiar with. The correlation between the necessity of vitamin K1 and K2 and D. Now, people understand when a D level is low on a blood test, they need to increase that level to a more normal range. We'll talk about the range in just a moment, but what is the importance of K as it relates to D?
Well, vitamin D and vitamin K are friends, and most often vitamin K is made by the friendly bacteria in the gut, or we do get some in our nutritional protocol from diet, but that vitamin K is considered a cofactor, a friend of vitamin D that is necessary for the appropriate and proper absorption of the levels of vitamin D that we need to get from the gut.
I love the sun, as you know. We like to go out and enjoy the sun. I'll tell you right now. Can we get enough D from the sun?
Well, think about that logically. We have been trained to stay out of the sun and avoid the UV radiation and cover up from that sun through time. So if we're wearing sunscreens and shirts and cover-ups and hats to prevent getting the sun through the skin, then our vitamin D levels likely are not going to be optimal. And then we say, well, can you get enough of it from the diet? There are not a lot of foods that are very high in vitamin D, or the foods that have vitamin D in it are few, And if you were to get enough vitamin D from a specific food, for example, milk, which has about 110 international units a day, or 110 international units in 8 ounces, think about the high volume of milk you would have to drink to get enough vitamin D in one day, and then we would get obesity because of milk fat and the caloric load from too much vitamin D.
All right, so I've got one for you. When I was a kid, I saw people, and it was on television, these families like Andy Griffith Show and things like that. They would take a spoonful of that cod liver oil, and they would say, take this every day, and wow! I mean, I actually tried that one time. Horrible. So tell me how much D is in there, and how much of that you would have to take.
Well, cod liver oil has about 1,000 international units of vitamin D per tablespoon. And that's pretty good, but let's say we need to replete a low vitamin D level, and the number that you have on a lab value or the deficiency that you may have is going to tell you the amount of vitamin D that you need. So if you, let's say you need 5,000 international units a day in addition to your normal daily diet to bring that vitamin D level up, that's 5 tablespoons of cod liver oil.
Yummy. Not. Okay, so when we talk about, as I mentioned a few moments ago, this idea about the D levels. Now, I know it's a 0 to 100, and there are levels out there that practitioners are trying to get the patients to for reasons which we'll talk about in just a moment. What are some levels that are considered normal?
Okay. Well, the levels of vitamin D can be very complex when we start to get into the forms of vitamin D, but let's make it simple. For example, a level of 30 to 100 is what we will typically see in a lab value. And that's a very, very wide range. It's a very large range for us to think about being normal. That's the normal range, but is that optimal? A more optimal level, or a more optimal or efficient level is going to be the level of 60 to 100.
Okay, so 60 to 100. Let's say someone comes in, and I've seen this with my own eyes, and we've talked about this with patients. Their level is 18. How much D do they need to take, and for how long to expect to get that up to, say, 60?
It takes quite a while to elevate a vitamin D level that is 18. For one, that is below the range of what we consider to be normal, right? So that is a very low level of vitamin D. So I prefer, in my clinical practice, to utilize vitamin D3 with the addition of vitamin K1 and K2 to get that level up over time instead of using vitamin D2, which is ergocalciferol. So if we take cholecalciferol, which is vitamin D3, in order to get that number to a therapeutic range, it takes about 10,000, that is 10,000 international units a day for at least 3 months. So it is not slow. Just like the healing of an ankle sprain, how long does it take? 8 to 12 weeks. How long does it take to, turn over a red blood cell? 120 days. So it takes time. We have to be consistent and persistent with loading that vitamin D through time and then come back and check that level. However, you don't want to just start taking 10,000 international units of vitamin D without talking to your practitioner and making sure that that level and that need and that intake is appropriate for you.
All right, so vitamin D as it relates to bone health. We've talked a lot about the calcium, and you and I were talking before we went on today about, bone health being very important. How does D exactly relate to that?
Well, vitamin D is very important in the mineralization of bone and the mineralization of bone and the absorption of calcium from the gut and through the skin into the system. Vitamin D does go through conversion phases in the liver and kidneys, so you have to have healthy liver and kidneys that have specific enzymes to make these conversions to aid the delivery of calcium into the bones. So vitamin D is essential for that mineralization and health of the bones.
So vitamin D, K1 and K2, and calcium all work together synergistically to increase the health of the bone.
That's correct. We can't get hyper-focused on just one mineral, or oftentimes we have deficiencies in other areas. The nutrients that we take in are synergistic. They all play together, they communicate together, they work together for the common good, and in bone health, we've got many players. It's not just calcium.
Now, I hope you're really catching wind of what we're talking about today. We mentioned something called synergistic workings. You know, when God packaged things, he packaged them together, so they were designed to work together. So what we're saying is, know what we're talking about regarding your own health and begin to take ownership. And, you know, if a practitioner tells you to take D, ask the right questions. Does it have K in it? What does this relationship do? If someone tells you to take just calcium, you know, if you don't have enough D, that's not going to do you much good, and that calcium could be deposited elsewhere. So we're talking about really connecting the dots in our health, and that's the purpose of what we're talking about. Okay, so back to our level discussion, even as we continue to discuss how things tie together. If a person isn't 18, you give them 10,000 IUs a day for 3 months, and let's say it's only went up to 30. What other issues could be there causing it to not to come up higher to a more appropriate range?
Well, first of all, what we want to make sure, if we're taking vitamin D, if we're taking it internally in a supplement form, we want to make sure that we have a pharmaceutical grade product, that we have a product that we can rely on, that it is true vitamin D, that it's not just a placebo, and we're not just taking something that has no power and has no potency. The other thing we want to make sure of is that if vitamin D is not coming up, that our cofactors are okay, vitamin K1, K2, and that all those players are okay. If that is still appropriate, then we're going to want to look at gut health. What is the health of the GI lining, that lining of the intestinal tract? Is it sick from too much of the standard American diet, SAD, standard American diet? Do we have too many additives, preservatives, metabolic waste products, caffeine, you know, stimulants, things that are tearing down that GI lining and interrupting the friendly bacteria, that bacterial load that's in the gut, that is an ecology, a friendly ecology that actually helps us make that vitamin K1 and K2. So if we're not getting our levels up, then we have to start looking at what are the other factors that are causing a malabsorption. We could even have a syndrome of ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, or a fat-soluble vitamin absorption issues. So, but once we know that we've got a good quality product going in there, that we've got good bacteria that's in the gut, then we have to go looking for other chronic medical issues.
And see, this is kind of cool, because this is the very epitome of a description of functional medicine in itself. It's better. It's different than like a dog chasing the tail. Something's wrong, we throw a pill at it. Something's wrong, we throw a supplement at it. We don't want to fall into the trap, even with supplements, of throwing supplements at conditions just because the condition says so. We must look how everything relates. And it's funny how everything we talk about relates back to what we put in our mouth, because we know what we put in our mouth is what destroys the ecology in the gut. It causes the dysbiosis, and we actually start right back here with what comes in here. And it's almost from a spiritual sense, what goes up here affects our whole body, but what goes in here affects our whole body. Yes. So isn't that the very definition of what we're talking about, this functionality of the whole body?
Right. We have to treat the temple correctly, and we're supposed to treat the temple correctly. It is imperative that we treat the temple correctly, because as we well know, we cannot outpill a bad diet. It does not make sense to take supplementation in the face of a poor nutritional protocol, because the system can't even think about absorbing what we're putting into it if we're putting the wrong stuff into it and then trying to add supplementation on top.
Because the supplements are not going to be absorbed properly if the gut is dysfunctional and you've got the hyperpermeable lining, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You could be taking this stuff not just 3 months, but 3 years, and it's not going to do you that much good. You may get a little rise in that level 2 maybe the bottom of the norm, say 30 or 31. But is that really okay to be at the bottom of a norm?
That's not the optimal level. You know, most oftentimes a normal vitamin D, someone may be asymptomatic or not have any symptoms of a low vitamin D or low bone mineral density or immune problems, joint dysfunction. There may be no symptoms there, but in the process of aging, we want to make sure that we have optimal function with all of our biomarkers and all of our internal health markers that keep us healthy through time. And we know that vitamin D is related to bone health and immune health and the health of the arterial lining.
So D is something with the proper coenzyme or cofactors of K. It's something we probably will want to stay with proper gut health for the rest of our life, really.
Right. Well, vitamin D is a recommended dietary supplement, and the studies have come out now. We're starting to learn more and more about vitamin D, and the recommended daily allowances and those things are starting to change, but we do have to be mindful, and it's important to be mindful of where it even does come from in food. And like I said before, that foodstuffs are not very plentiful, and oftentimes we're not going to eat enough of those foodstuffs to get the appropriate support that we need, like cod liver oil and salmon oil and milk and sardines. We have to eat so much of that stuff in order to get the appropriate amount to resuscitate a low vitamin D level that we're going to end up fat or overweight from the caloric load of the foods that actually have the sufficient amount of vitamin D in them.
You know, what I found fascinating with this is when you and I were doing some research before this, the RDA, or the minimum daily value of D, is 15 to 20 micrograms. And I was amazed that 1 microgram is 40 international units. So when we talk about 15 to 20 of those things, 20 of them being 800 international units, you're talking 10 times that to replete that. So if someone's looking at just an RDA level, or recommended daily value, and it says 20 micrograms, which is 800 international units, that's not even going to be a minimum, right?
That's correct. That's why to try to get that replenishment from food is almost virtually impossible. We need supplementation to bring up a subtherapeutic vitamin D level into the proper range. And that's when you seek out your healthcare practitioner, your medical professional, to help guide you with what's appropriate for you and your system.
Okay, so vitamin K, there's a lot of talk about how it affects anticoagulation drugs. Can you explain that for everyone and what to look for in that?
Very, very, very important that you don't just put vitamin K on board if you are on blood thinners of any kind, because it can interrupt the therapeutic lab values that we're trying to achieve with the blood thinners. So if you are on blood thinners, do not go out and just supplement with vitamin K. Talk to your practitioner about that beforehand, and make sure you've even evaluated your multivitamins for that as well.
Good point. And D deficiency, let's just call it for what it is. D deficiency is often misdiagnosed into other conditions. What are the couple other conditions regarding D deficiency that is just that, but we call them something else? As far as, like, I hear fibromyalgia is one of them. True or not true?
Well, I mean, vitamin D, a low vitamin D level, there are instances where people have a lower threshold of pain, meaning that their system is a little bit more hypersensitive, or they may have more myalgic or muscle pain. So vitamin D could be a very important thing for a patient individual with fibromyalgia to have evaluated.
Okay, so what if they have a lot of pain or a sensitivity to pain? That could indeed be a D deficiency, correct?
It could be. One of the old man, or the poor man's blood pressure evaluations one of the poor man's evaluations for low vitamin D before we had laboratory evaluations was to utilize a blood pressure cuff, and if taking that blood pressure created pain in the arm, extreme pain in the arm, that was indicative of vitamin D deficiency, called a poor man's vitamin D check.
Man, I must have D deficiency because they put these cuffs on me that are too small and it hurts every time. I'm telling you that.
Get your labs checked.
I'm in jest with that. The bottom line is what we're telling you is really get your arms around the health information that you're given. I mean, it's great to go get checked for your wellness check. Get your blood test, but know what the interpretation is. When you have, for example, you know, we talk about the word here, you know, it's great to have the word, but if you can't interpret it correctly, it can really hurt you and mess you up because it can be misinterpreted. Just like our health, it's great to have information, but if it's interpreted correctly, that's wonderful. If it's not, that can cause damage. So we really want to encourage you with and enlighten you with information. And this was a great discussion on D because we see that all the time. And you know, we really want you to really hear our hearts with this. We are trying to equip you, to empower you, to make better decisions in your life. And you know, oftentimes, you know, it's not that we don't know or we don't desire to make good decisions. It's just that we don't know. And so we try to give them knowledge, right? Just knowledge.
Right. Knowledge is power.
And power is knowledge. See, when you put the knowledge in correct use, it's called wisdom. Incorrect use of knowledge is stupidity. We have that sometimes. I've been a goofball many times in my life. So we want to encourage you to just take the information and put it to appropriate use.
What does the Lord tell us? My people will perish for lack of knowledge. So we are giving you the appropriate knowledge, but it's up to you to put it in effect.
And she didn't just say that. That's Hosea 4:6 if you want to look that up too. So we wanted to tell you truths that are going to set you free. You know, get on our websites and connect with us. We have great reports on the blogs and some of the information we share educational-wise. Get on our websites and connect with us. You want to stay connected, you can get on there very easy and sign up for the newsletter. It doesn't cost anything. We don't ask for your money like that. We just want to empower you. So stay connected with us on that. Even on the website, there's ways you can connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Support us as you can with prayer. If the Lord lays on your heart to support us financially, do that. We do want you praying for us. Get on there and take the value pledge. That is something I want you to live by and begin to let it be a guide for you and your family. But let us be a resource for you and encouragement for you. And have a wonderful day. Take care.